First of all, many thanks to Margit and Morgan for the invitation and the organization of this conference. Before the title of my presentation causes further confusion, I am happy to solve this riddle. In the course of our research on Namjoon Paik's Boy's Head, we found this fax in the files on the artwork. Translated into plain English, the handwritten note means as permanent as all paintings. Paik wrote this down in December 1990, and in this specific case, the longevity of laserdiscs, the father of video art, was wrong. But more about that later. Margit asked me in the run-up to the conference to give a status quo on the current situation at the Staatsgalerie Stuttgart regarding the acquisition and preservation of media art. As a starting point for the presentation, however, I wanted to look back at the results and the challenges of the research project Digital Art Conservation, which was held here at the ZKM from 2010 to 2012, and which I helped to carry out. 10 case studies were completed within the project, including Namjoon Paik's Internet Dream from 1994. In summary, I was able to name these problem areas listed here. Data backup, long-term archiving. I wrote back then, in the case of digital works of art, it is invariably data backup which ought to be the first priority, and not, as it is often observed, the work's presentation in the museum. Everyday routine of the museum, staff and infrastructure. Elaborating on this point, I stated, shrinking financial resources, deficient know-how in information technology, and fluctuating personnel are grounds for concern, as well as careless treatment of the collection objects and non-existent concepts for backing up data. Knowledge is lost, also due to high staff turnover, which is apparently accepted without instituting countermeasures early enough. The past 2 years in particular proved this. There was a very high turnover within the staff, and in many cases, there was no transfer of knowledge. As another point, I listed inadequate and lax documentation and the lack of academic studies of the works. I wrote, "It cannot be denied that the standard institutional documentations exhibit considerable weaknesses, especially with regard to the complexity and variety of digital art." And on the last point, I wrote, "However, in spite of the fact that there is an increasing need for action, recognition of the work done by this field," meaning our field, "is still lacking." If I now compare these points with my everyday work at the Staatsgalerie today, I have to state that these problem areas still exist. With regard to long-term archiving, we are working on a solution with other local institutions, for example, the Landesfilmsammlung Baden-Württemberg and the State Archives of Baden-Württemberg. Unfortunately, without significant success yet. Due to recent events, I would now like to continue with work by the German artist Walter Giers. At the end of July, we received a loan request for Giers' work, Musik für 64 Lautsprecher from 1976. It was only through the loan request for the upcoming exhibition here at the ZKM that the restoration department and the curatorial team were confronted with the artwork. The files show that the work was exhibited as a permanent loan for a total of 17 years in a museum in Giers' hometown of Schwäbisch Gmünd. It can be assumed that any defects that occurred were repaired by the artist himself or by his assistants during this period, but without any traceable documentation. After another 10 years since return, the work should be lent out at short notice, a request that the Staatsgalerie unfortunately could not fulfill in the short time available. A presentation in a non-functional state was also considered. At this point, I will quote Johannes Gfeller, "When an artwork no longer functions, whose chief aesthetic characteristic consists in its time-based components, it is a dead work. Yet even in some cases, it can still be exhibited as a kind of tool, a kind of artifact. However, this approach is rather the exception and is tinged with tristesse, because the original function can no longer be experienced. End of quote. The positive effect of this withdrawn loan request is that not only Walter Gier's works, but also, for example, Peter Vogel's sculpture, minimal music piece for 7 players, have come into focus. The last 2 objects are evidence of the fact that the artworks often only receive the attention they deserve when they are requested for loan or for exhibition. This is partly due to the staff situation. For example, my full-time job is split. I can devote 60% of my working time to restoration. 40% of my working time is devoted to the installation, care, and maintenance of media technology setups in the Staatsgalerie. To put this into perspective, I would like to give you just a very brief overview of the collection. Today, the Staatsgalerie Stuttgart's time-based media art collection, inclusive of the artworks in the Sohm archive, encompasses more than 1,700 objects. About 500 objects are videos and films. Around a third of these are artistic works and 2/3 are documentations. The collection of sound works contains more than 1,200 objects. About 70% of these audio works are artistic productions, the rest are precious documents, and we are currently trying to alleviate the staff situation by creating new positions. So, if somebody's interested. The Fluxus Home movies by Joe Jones were also only digitized in preparation for an upcoming exhibition next year. Jones, born in 1934 and deceased in 1993, was an American avant-garde musician / artist associated with Fluxus. According to an article by Michael Wessing, Jones produced the Fluxus Home movies with a Commodore 64. As you can see from the still, the video is dedicated to the dentist and passionate Fluxus collector Hans Sohm. The Sohm archive, named after him, was acquired by the Staatsgalerie in 1981. Before I show you another short clip, I would like to point out a tweet by Cory Archangel from January 2021. I quote, "What if I told you Joe Jones made a Fluxus movie on an 8-bit computer in the 80s, and there is even a part where clouds float by on blue sky? I think when I made my work Super Mario Clouds in 2002, I hadn't even learned about Fluxus yet, but somehow it must have sunk into my brain as I somehow recreated this scene a decade later." End of quote. Little Zen moment. In the following, I would like to discuss some of the acquisitions of recent years. But before that, however, I would like to take a brief look back into the past. The Staatsgalerie Stuttgart has always pursued a progressive acquisition strategy, especially in the early days of video art. This is evidenced by the first entries in the inventory book. If one ignores the first entry, the first video recorder setup of the Staatsgalerie, one comes across such prominent names as Gary Schumm, Joseph Beuys, Gilbert and George, Rainer Rutenbeck, Ulrich Rückriem, John Baldessari, and Franz Erhard Walter among the first 10 entries from 1970 onwards. Another example that I forgot about that. Another example of the early progressive attitude of the Staatsgalerie is this exhibition catalog. In 1972, the Staatsgalerie organized a traveling exhibition in Baden-Württemberg under the title Grenzgebiete der bildenden Kunst. For the computer art section, the responsible curators Arnaud and Siegfried Krämer were able to win artist Herbert W. Franke as an advisor. Franke, who was already well connected at the time, organized contributions by Manfred Mohr, Georg Nees, Frida Nake, and Hiroshi Kawano, among others. The exhibition was presented in 11 cities. Fast forward to 2015. That year, the video installation Shake, Rattle and Roll, Flux Mix by Christian Markley was acquired by the Staatsgalerie. The production of the video Bildspiel was also founded. Playful as well as critical of institutions, Markley revives a Kugelbild by the artist Dieter Roth, which he selected from the Sohm archive for his new single-channel video. Markley lets the Kugelbild rotate and thus resound. In the recording, he plays it like an instrument. He composes the footage in the editing and thereby expands the acoustic range of variation. The Staatsgalerie team had the opportunity to follow and to document the entire production process. Here too, I would like to show you a short clip of Bildspiel. 2016 saw the purchase and 5-month presentation of the large-scale video installation Manifesto. In 13 synchronized monologues, Julian Rosefeld collages original text from futurism to conceptual art into new texts. They are interpreted by the actress Cate Blanchett, who slips into various roles. The installation covered 460 square meters on the ground floor of the historical part of the museum. To achieve the highest possible sound reproduction, all rooms had to be soundproofed using a special insulating material. In 2019, the Staatsgalerie presented the exhibition Weißenhof City, the history and present of the future of a city. For this, Michaela Melian produced 2 installations with sound. Both were purchased following the exhibition. Girl Culture consists of a wide variety of analog and digital components. Through a slide projector, in front of whose lens an optical prism rotates, the slide of a historical photograph is brought into a cinematic flowing movement and broken down into spectral colors, only to dissolve again in the next moment. The technical apparatus is reminiscent of Laszlo Moholy-Nagy's light space modulator. The room is sounded by a multi-channel sound system with the puppet reproducing quotes from Bauhaus greats. The video sculpture Power Plant by Hito Steyer, which was installed only 3 months ago, is the most recent purchase by the Staatsgalerie, made in the spring of this year. The artwork consists of a scaffolding structure, LED screens, 40 in total, and LED ticker signs. The LED screens show looped animations of growing flowers and plants. This installation is not an acquisition, but here too, in preparation for this year's exhibition, moved by Schlemmer, 100 Years of Triadic Ballet, there was a lively exchange with the studio of the artist Hegyu Yang. The technical realization of the so-called sound fruits, the sound-producing component, was left to the team of the Staatsgalerie. Fabricating the sound fruits was an exciting challenge that led to a very pleasing result in the exhibition. Nevertheless, I would like to point out that such projects tie up staff capacities to a high degree. I have to smile because the curator of the exhibition is actually here, so she knows more about that. The Staatsgalerie Stuttgart is highly concerned to present and to continue to collect time-based media art as one of the central production forms of contemporary art on equal terms within the context of other fields of its collection, such as painting, sculpture, prints and drawings, and photography. At the same time, the museum is well aware of the urgent and long-neglected task of saving and preserving of its existing collection of audiovisual objects. Thus, the institution has a strong desire to take action and tackle the challenge of its time-based media artworks. In 2013, we started to work on the preservation of the collection of time-based media art. To date, we mainly focus on the digitization of video and audio works and photochemical films, and will continue with the conservation of installations such as Namjoon Paik's Boy's Head. The 4 laserdiscs of the Paik installation, already mentioned at the beginning, could be digitized in-house. The videos are now playback by media players. However, the restoration of the 44 CRT televisions and 16 replacement units could only be tackled with the financial support of the Wüstenrot Stiftung. For this purpose, we are able to win Christian Draheim and Jochen Saueracker, who subsequently also actively supported us in setting up the installation. Surely we will learn more about their work tomorrow morning. After 28 years in the depot, the installation was set up for the first time for the exhibition Josef Beuys, der Raumkurator, in March 2021, and has now been running defect-free for over a year. Boy's Head, Paik's homage to his artist friend Joseph Beuys, was restored over a total period of 3 years. I would classify Brian O'Doherty's kinetic light sculpture Portrait of Marcel Duchamp, 3 leads, among the precursors of electronic art, which is why I've also included this work in the presentation. The artwork was also restored with the support of the Wüstenrot Stiftung. The light sculpture is part of a series of works based on the recording of Marcel Duchamp's heartbeat in the form of an electrocardiogram as the artistic source material. According to legend, the cardiogram was created when Marcel Duchamp was invited to dinner at the home of fellow artist O'Doherty. On this occasion, O'Doherty, who as a trained doctor has the necessary professional knowledge, asked for Duchamp's heart curve to be recorded. Duchamp agreed, leaving behind the electrocardiograph source material for the development of the abstract portrait series. O'Doherty used a standard fluorescent lamp, a small electric motor, a prepared plastic loop, and a gutted spirit level as materials for this object. A fluorescent lamp is installed inside the sculpture. In front of the light source, driven by an electric motor, runs a plastic loop that is light-tight and has translucent vertical slits at regular intervals. In the coming together of the moving light slit of the loop and the hard tension curve in the windows of the spirit level, the impression of an advancing point of light is created. The work has been part of the collection since 2005. It could be seen for the first time through our restoration project in the exhibition Marcel Duchamp, 100 Questions, 100 Answers in 2018, 13 years later. If I have aroused your interest in this artwork, I would like to refer you to the excellent thesis by Heike Helfert, who's actually here too today. As already described, we are currently making progress with the digitization of the sound recordings. Here's one example from the collection of over 1,200 objects. This record was released in 1979 in an edition of 200 and was signed by both artists. And on my last slide, you can see a unique piece, a prototype for a Fluxus box, also from the collection of the Sohm archive. The later edition of the box was provided with a small transistor radio instead of the tape recorder with the earplug and the open reel recordings. The box documents the happening Dogs in Chinese Not Allowed, which was held in New York City in 1966. The recordings include conversations between Wolf Vostell and Emmett Williams, Al Hansen, and Alan Caprow. Our main concern here, through digitization, is to ensure the rescue and the accessibility of the information. We are still finding challenging objects like this one in our vast collection, especially Fluxus-related art. But we are confident to generate innovative solutions here too, maybe with the support of this community. In 2012, I wrote, "Procrastination and hesitation may have very serious consequences, as will become apparent at the latest when action is unavoidable." I still believe that this statement is valid. But it gives me great confidence to find here and now a large number of new young colleagues, including former students and interns, who prove that new positions have been created in the recent past. Their work assignment should not only be supported by appreciation and adequate work equipment, but also by the possibility to exchange ideas in an interdisciplinary environment and to literally embody the concept of knowledge transfer. Thanks.